So wait a second, 100 in 10 minutes.
Well, that's what he did. I did it in 20. It might have very well have been 10, but I feel like it feels more like
I did 555 minutes.
Really? Like
I'll do
full dead hang, like all the way down, just to the bar.
Oh, you're talking. Oh, wait a second. You're talking pull-ups.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking push-ups.
No.
Oh yeah.
no.
There's no way in hell I'm doing 100 of them in 10 minutes. Okay. All right. It's just. I'm glad that's forever recorded. That'll be excellent.
No.
Yeah. No. To be for the record. No. No. Not doing that at all.
Push-ups is I don't know. I used to like strength training wise. My focus used to be like just like as many reps as I can possibly bang out within a certain amount of time. So I would look at the clock and say, hey, I'm gonna set it to 20 minutes, see how many we can do, particular body weight exercise, and then we'll use that as a metric.
Okay.
And the next time we work, okay, we're either trying to get more reps in the same amount of time
or quicker.
Exactly.
So you can do one or the other.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or I try to beat the clock.
It's a very simple, nice way to challenge. But you can also, it gives you the option of challenging one way, and then you can also back off and just do a more relaxed, less pressure.
Because especially with jiu-jitsu, like the balance between, hey, how much strength training and how much complementary work do I do, or supplementary work for my jiu-jitsu do I do, versus just time on the mats and working my technique, rolling, et cetera, is always like a tough thing to kind of figure out, because you don't want to like kill yourself in the weight room. Then you're just like, you're not functional on the mat, but you also don't want to just like, be the guy who's all technical and you have no endurance, outside of the endurance that you develop on the mat. So the body weight exercises for me have always been pretty like an easy go-to. Okay. For a few reasons. One is it's like a time investment in the skill. Yeah. Right. If I want to do Olympic lifting, that's a sport in and of itself that takes time to develop your technique and get good at. And if I have time to develop technique, that time's probably better suited for time on the mat for jiu-jitsu technique rather than strength training technique. Whereas someone doing a push-up or a pull-up, it's relatively, it's a compound movement. It's still a very simple movement, which you can still do wrong.
But it's also a good movement. It's also a good setup for the white belt who's coming in, has a 4x4 area in a 1-bedroom apartment, or lives with their parents. They can you don't need to spend money on. It's even simpler than running. You don't even need good running shoes. You just need a flat surface.
Exactly.
And there's no excuse why you can't do push-ups and sit-ups.
Even prior to jiu-jitsu, what helped me a lot is when I lived in Boston, I was lucky enough to live near the Charles River, and on the river on both sides, there are like little playground areas, and it's like a playground for calisthenics, and there are pull-up bars. So you'd run 1.5 miles to the pull-up bars, and then you could stay there and do your
whatever
work,
you can do,
and then run back, and no gym membership required. But I would say that by now, most jiu-jitsu schools are going to have some kind of a setup that's similar to this, where you've got, pull-up bars and you've got some sort of weights. Even if you don't have like a full CrossFit rack setup, you'll still, chances are, have some kind of a pull-up bar. I've even seen like some schools, like Stephen Kesting, in the background of his videos, he's got the peg boards.
Oh, like from my grade school days that no one could do. There'd be like 2 kids in 6th grade that could do it.
Simple, but it doesn't need to be that complicated. So
simple move. I'm a big fan of, though. You don't want to overwhelm someone who starts out by going, okay, now you also have to join a gym, and then I want you to have 3 sets of dumbbells, and then you need to. The running shoes, you can't skimp on that too. And by the way, I need you to buy 2 gis. They're $150 each, and then all of a sudden $900 in, and the person goes, well,
big financial investment for something that you might not necessarily have your heart 100% into.
Right.
I'm lucky in that when I started jiu-jitsu, I knew the very first day that I would do it forever. Like
really?
It's one of the very few things in life that I kind of ease myself into with certain other things. Like, hey, like I play music. Music was something I developed over time. Jiu-jitsu was literally the first day I watched Bruno Amaral on the mat teaching class. I don't even remember what it was.
Bruno, this one's for you, brother.
Right?
You guys burned me on the interview, which is why Brandon's doing this interview, and we had to reschedule yours twice. Still love you. Still wearing the shirt, but.
That's all right. That's all right. Os Professor. Come up here and beat us up with the Yamaral next. So.
Okay, so we got sidetracked. This is Eric from the Healthy Gorilla podcast and owner of the Natural Food Exchange. I asked Brandon last minute if he could do a podcast with me, and I figured we were going to talk about jiu-jitsu, but he wants to talk about cooking. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting segue. So before the
I'm
camera,
going to do whatever you want.
Yeah. So it's an interesting segue because we just spent the past 10 minutes kind of shooting around talking about jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. Jiu-jitsu and strength
which we
training.
do texting 3 times, 4 times a week anyway. So
fairly regularly.
Yeah.
So the adding nutrition and diet into it is actually like the cooking aspect of it seems maybe a little bit off, but like in terms of sort of how diet affects your performance for jiu-jitsu and for all sort of athletic and even just your general health is huge.
So someone looking at you,
Wow.
lots of well, no, I mean, like, you're very fit. I mean,
Thank
lots of supplements, lots of sports proteins.
You would think.
You would think.
None at all. I think I have a shaker cup that's right behind the camera, and it's got some kind of amino BCAA in there, and really that's just because I rather drink that than water.
Yeah.
Otherwise, believe it or not, I do take a fistful of vitamins with my meals, but as far as like sports specific supplements goes, I'm really not a big fan of powders. Right, Eric? Eric throws some samples at me every once in a while, and I'll make a mess in my kitchen with some, like vegetable shakes.
I sense this video is not going to generate a lot of extra business for the store, but go ahead.
But that being said, the jiu-jitsu got me into nutrition because for jiu-jitsu, it's a combat sport, you have to make weight, right? You generally speaking, you want to be sort of the strongest and the largest person in your weight class, which means that you typically want to drop to a reasonable weight class that you can get to, so that you'll be at an advantage, right? And that's not something that, that's a whole nother conversation as to whether or not that's worth the endeavor, but for better or for worse, that was sort of what I was looking at to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then came the question of, hey, how do we lose weight? How do we lose this 25 pounds or 30 pounds in the next 2 months? And still maintain some level of athletics performance in order to go and compete.
And to do it gradually, as opposed to, say, a UFC fighter who wants to drop strictly water weight right before a fight. And then, because people probably don't know, but if you do an IBJJ, which is jiu-jitsu, you get weighed seconds before you fight. So there is no rehydration period. You are fighting at whatever weight you are at, the true weight.
I think for the audience, it's probably worth making a strong, serious distinction between cutting weight
and losing weight,
or rather like weight loss for competition, right? If I have a competition and I have a target goal, typically I'm looking at starting 2 or 3 months out, right? Mm-hmm. That way we're doing this properly. Okay. Right? Like, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to sign up for this competition. Hey, I need to lose this 25 pounds in 2 weeks, right? Which typically is going to take the form of dehydration. Right. And some sort of mineral deprivation to assist in that dehydration, right? Which can be dangerous, right? You see videos of UFC fighters, renal failure with, they need the IV bags in order to rehydrate.
And those are men and women in the peak physical condition, 20s, early 30s, not 52.
Exactly, right? So for the rest of us, the approach, I think, should be a little bit more conservative in terms of, hey, how am I going to, attack weight loss? And, for the record, not at all a credentialed expert in nutrition or weight loss or...
I have an art degree,
so
you should not take...
So really when I speak, it's based on my experience of having gained and lost weight, specifically for competition over a period of time, right? And having done so successfully for probably the better part of the past 9 years, right? What originally happened was I looked at what was the most popular diet at the time. I think I started jiu-jitsu in 2012, so around then CrossFit was huge. So the Paleo Diet was the big thing at the time, right? It's sort of like an Atkins-style diet where you are removing carbohydrates, or rather simple carbohydrates from your diet. So no rice, no bread, no potatoes, no grains. So basically, if the caveman couldn't get it, you couldn't eat it either, right? But that also meant no dairy, which for me, I might be unique in that, like, my body tolerates dairy. I love dairy. I drink a half gallon of milk every day, right? It's getting to be an expensive habit. But your typical, like, so for paleo, you couldn't eat that, which was fine. It was like, I think, a common elimination diet.
Oh, that's your phone.
Yeah. An elimination diet, generally, they're pretty successful for most people who are starting a diet because it it cuts off the options, right? Suddenly now, when you go to BJ's or you go to Target, you're, okay, well, the entire snack food aisle is off limits, right? You're basically boiling it down to just sort of real food, right? Which over time, having tried a variety of diets, obviously, like the second time I went to cut weight, I used paleo, but I used it more as a loose framework, right? I said, hey, you know what?
That's what my wife is doing right now.
My body tolerates dairy, so why don't I introduce that back in? So starting from a very rigid elimination diet and then slowly adding foods back in to see how my body reacts to them, how it affects me athletically.
That's essentially the Whole30.
Right.
If you're,
I'm unfamiliar with Whole30.
I will get you the book. Kamari has loaned that book out probably a dozen times. It keeps circling back like a boomerang. But that's essentially, you have an extremely strict diet for 30 days, and then you add back in so you can actually feel what the effect of adding dairy back in is. And for you, nothing. So add it back in. But for me, congestion, leave it out. So you basically start with a clean palate after 30 days, and you slowly add in the allergens and see what clicks in. That's a very simplified version of it.
Which is a smart approach, right? Because that way you're not going from, the super strict elimination diet to hey, I'm just going to go jump back into Five Guys and Chick-fil-A. On occasion, sure, but for most of us, I think trying to reach whatever our goals happen to be, that's going to be sort of contrary to what we're trying to get to. Right? So I think the biggest question, so now sort of focusing on the diet from then to now. Over time, there's been a lot of trial and error. Hey, I think the first thing I added back in was Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt was casein protein, very satiating at night. So that's something that I would eat every night before bed. But then I think over time I started to I kind of started to be a little bit more detailed in terms of the sort of how I would evaluate foods, right? Look at. So I used to buy these yogurts, and I won't say the brand, but it's a very popular yogurt. And there's fruit at the bottom, right? And it's very tasty, right? And honestly, if you sent me to Whole Foods or wherever, or
tremendous amounts of sugar.
Ton of sugar.
It's like eating a sugar cube.
So rather than just go cold turkey, hey, you know what? Why don't I get the plain Greek yogurt, and then I'll do a 50-50. I'll mix the. I'll cut it almost as if you were sort of watering it down, but with the Greek yogurt. And then, okay, well, maybe what if I just bought my own dried fruits or fresh fruits, right? And then started to mix that in. And then eventually I got to a point where honestly I didn't really even need the Greek yogurt. And I said, hey, you know what, before bed, maybe I won't eat it all. And that's where the fasting started to play a big role. And that right now is sort of,
that's your latest kick.
I wouldn't say it's I mean, it looks like it's a fad at this point, but for me, I found a lot, that's been the, aside from the concept of elimination diet, hey, I'm only going to eat, my diet is going to be structured basically around meat and vegetables. That's been the most significant change that I've been able to make.
So you fast how many hours typically?
Generally around, say about 18 or 19 hours. So my feeding window is typically between 5 and 10 p.m.
So 5 and 10 p.m., that's it?
That's it.
So, and you find that works for, you're just not, I think you had said something last week where you didn't realize how much food you didn't have to eat.
Correct. You find out, I mean, and this is something I found out in 2012, right? I figured out very quickly that, because the volume of food, even when I was doing the elimination diet, was still relatively small because I still needed to affect that weight loss. You figure out very quickly that, hey, maybe I don't need as much, I don't need as much food as I thought I needed, right? That's a common thing that I talk to people, oh, I'm hungry. You realize that, and it's interesting, it builds a certain level of discipline in you. That can actually carry over to so many things. Like we often talk about jiu-jitsu builds discipline that carries over to other aspects in your life. You kind of get to a point where you realize, hey, I don't actually need this stuff. Maybe I'm just bored. I'm not actually hungry.
Yeah, and
right?
but I don't know if that would work for me.
Yeah.
Like I've never tried that, but I don't know also at my age if it would be wise.
Yeah.
Too. So there's an older gentleman I know. I don't want to get too specific, but who does similar fasting.
Yeah.
And I personally think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because as you get into your 50s, 60s, 70s, it is would you agree it's a stressor on your body?
I think so, yeah. So, I mean, it depends
I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm just...
again, right, if you're going to fast, obviously, or if you're going to try any sort of a diet or anything like that along those lines, consult your doctor, right? But for me, looking at the fasting, right, I didn't start fasting to say, hey, I'm only going to eat for 5 hours. Right. Originally, it started as was, hey, I'd seen some information online, some podcasts, like throwing out there, like the Rogan podcast. I'd seen Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who's got a lot of great work online, and speaking a lot about the benefits of fasting. So, hey, maybe it's worth a shot. Yep. So said, hey, you know what? I'm going to do the 16-8.
Okay.
Right? And actually, I lied. I think I was doing the 15-9, right? Because I'm hey, I don't get out of the gym until 8:30, 9 o'clock. By the time I get home...
So 15 hours of fasting.
Exactly. Okay. So typically that looked like, hey, maybe like noon to 9.
Yep.
Or 12:30 to 9:30, which is more realistic. If I could stretch it to 1 to 10, that would work better for my lifestyle because typically I'm in the gym every day, 6 to 9.
Okay.
So I'm not home, and then by the time I get home, get something prepared, showered, everything's all said and done, it's like 10 o'clock. So that's why that 5 to 10 works for me. But I started noon, and that was fine. Right now, I'm drinking coffee all day.
So you're drinking...
So to be fair, or to be specific, right, if you're super strict in your definition of fasting, it's truly just water throughout the day. Right? And during your feeding window, you can sort of have whatever it is that fits in your diet. I'm also drinking milk during the day. Right.
So that's so you're not adhering to a strict, because milk is definitely a caloric source.
Right. So it's high in fat, there's sugar, right? So and there's protein. So but that for me is like, hey, I tolerate dairy. I can drink a lot of dairy, so
So it's a modified kind of.
Exactly.
So someone
would argue that I'm technically not really fast.
So or that
it's more of a solid food.
So someone could easily do. That could be this, not to give, free advertising to the Slim Fast diet, but that's essentially the Slim Fast diet. That's a shake in the morning, shake at night, and then healthy,
your solid meal.
Healthy meal at, so that's not the Anise who. Who Anise
doesn't drink water either, right?
He doesn't even drink water. Yeah. I've never seen. For those of you, Anise is a friend of ours. He's a professional fighter, and I have watched him during Ramadan look at his watch after beating the stuffing out of what I consider, I don't know, maybe a dozen terrifying men, and I go, what are you doing? You got to leave? No, I have 45 minutes. For what? I can drink water. He's been up. It's an evening class. He's, is observing Ramadan. I'm like, I had a coconut water on the ride over here just so I could survive. And he just laughs and 44 minutes. So that's not what you're doing.
Yeah. No, not at all. So, but that 9-hour feeding window or that 8-hour feeding window, I started to realize that, hey, it got to be 1 o'clock. Maybe I can get to 3. No problem. Maybe I had something at work that I needed to get done, right? Maybe I had meetings that went late, and then suddenly I'm eating at 3. This actually is all because of work, right? There were times where my job I needed to.
Well, you have a very not atypical schedule,
right? So there were some days where I needed to be in one place, and I was in that place, unable to get food or take a break, and I was there till 6 o'clock. So that's what ended up happening. Is every day we were working until well after 5 o'clock. But I'd get to 5 and we would break.
Okay.
And that's when I would get to have technically my breakfast.
Yep.
And I did that for the course of a week. I said, hey, you know what? Also, I wasn't exercising at the time, so sort of from the mindset of, hey, I'm still trying to affect weight loss here.
Yep.
By maintaining that fast and even doing that sort of a more restricted way, I was actually able to continue my weight loss even when I wasn't training because I was, working very long.
Camera literally scared the hell out of me because I thought we had lost all 20 minutes of our rambling. So we're good. My son is going to edit this together. We're good. So we're going to finish up.
Thank you, Luke Productions. So when I start, sort of figuring out the sort of like the what you should eat. So the next question is sort of where you're going to get it and how are you going to get it, right? Which is sort of a big open-ended topic because sort of like everyone's got different level of comfort with cooking. I know so many people who I talk to. I post quite a bit of what I cook and what I eat on Instagram. I'll message say, hey, I'm uncomfortable cooking meat. Hey, I'm uncomfortable, I can cook vegetables, but meat scares me. I don't understand.
Really?
Yeah, and what that to me, that tells me, and it drives to a big point of a lot of the questions that folks just ask me because I put a lot out there online, is, hey, how do I get started, or how do I X is like a big question. Hey, how do I lose weight? How do I eat like healthy? How do I do this? It's sort of like access to information. Seems to be, or correct information rather, seems to be the big driving force behind a lot of people. Like they just don't understand or what it is that they need to do in order to get to their goal. All right. So from a nutritional perspective, using those diets, or using those elimination diets was helpful for me because it basically set me up with a framework where someone asks me a question now. And I mean, this has been my answer for the past 8 years. What do you eat? Say, meat and vegetables.
Okay.
Meat, vegetables, eggs, nuts, dairy.
Okay.
Meat, vegetables, eggs, nuts, dairy. Right. So generally speaking, a high in fat diet. Coming from good sources of fat, right? So,
healthy avocados,
right, that kind of thing. But otherwise, most of my meals are mostly vegetables with a side of meat, right? So rather than the meat being sort of the main event, it's the other way around.
Which is actually the concept of the paleo that gets lost in translation somehow.
So I'm not eating like a tomahawk steak every day as much as I would enjoy that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Today's a good day for it. But
we should do that once the summer comes.
Right? But the idea is that, yes, I'm eating meat regularly, and obviously if you were choosing to, eat a vegan or a vegetarian lifestyles, there are protein alternatives for that. But I feel like what ends up happening is that in the standard American diet, right, typically it's some sort of a starch, a meat, and then the vegetable is an afterthought. With the vegetable now being the main event, it opens up so much. So originally when I started, I wasn't like I didn't have as much access to information as well. So simply, what I would eat is chicken breast, steak, or lamb. Seared. Either I would cook the chicken breast in the oven. It's like 475 for about 25 minutes.
Okay.
And then flip 15 minutes in between. I'd season it
and
quite a
just
bit.
be done.
And that would be it. And that actually worked very well into a routine because I could get home, dry and season the chicken. It would go into the oven. By the time I got out of the shower, I was ready to flip it. I could go, do some laundry, right? And then work that into my schedule. And then when it came time for the vegetables, though, it was just frozen vegetables. There's like a bag of frozen vegetables. You throw it in the microwave for 6 minutes, and then there's your vegetables. And guess what? For someone starting out, there's nothing wrong with that. Particularly if you're on a schedule, that is a great way to get vegetables into your diet, right? It's not necessarily as nutritious as fresh vegetables, but guess what? When COVID kicked off, the expectation that I had was that maybe I might not be able to get
them,
fresh vegetables. So for me, a lot of what I wouldn't say stockpile, but a lot of what I was looking to sort of stock my freezer with
make sure
was
you had
frozen vegetables to make sure that I had that spinach and that broccoli and the cauliflower and that sort of thing, and even the cauliflower rice, which saves some time. Right? So I think that's the way that I started. And then I began to peruse the vegetable aisle a little bit more in detail and say, hey, what's this kale thing? All right, and I buy a bunch of kale and sort of cut it up. And then the first time I made it, I cooked it with the stem on and was sort of very upset with my decision. But, right, but over time, what did I do? I went and said, hey, you know what? Go on YouTube. Take a look. Hey, how do I saute kale?
There's so much information out there.
So especially now, I mean, everybody's producing some level of content, whether it's quality or not, but there's information to be gathered. So if you fast forward to now, I've basically just taken that process of going on YouTube, going on Google, saying, hey, I'm going to pick this one food. I think I bought spaghetti squash very early on. It was like I didn't even know that it existed.
It's a crazy,
right? I took it home. I was like, I'm sitting there with my phone. I was like, I don't know, it could have been a flip phone at the time, right? I'm like scrolling through, like, okay, cut it in half.
What's the movie I watched where the guy said, he goes, it was a football player, and he's like, he just had gone vegan. He's like, asparagus is like 3 years old. It didn't exist 3 years ago.
Right.
I didn't, yeah.
So that opens up your options, because otherwise it's very easy to just eat staple starch foods like potatoes and rice, which, don't get me wrong, are delicious. Love them. But I realize that, okay, you know, these aren't going to help me get to my goal, right? If you're particularly sensitive to that sort of thing, or if you're maybe pre-diabetic, right? That kind of, like, that it can be an issue. So for me, and then, like, no, just forget the health-wise. I just, from an athletics perspective and a weight management perspective, I know that if I eat a cup of rice tomorrow, that's going to negatively impact my weight goals, and then naturally my performance.
So it's funny when you said people have trouble, like, I don't know how to cook steak.
Yeah.
Do they know how to cook vegetables? Because to me, if you're going to order, it seems like you could probably find a good steak delivered to your door pretty easily. Good vegetable dishes, not so much. You can get iceberg lettuce, you know, with a chicken kebab or something like that.
Yeah. Late night especially. Not.
Yeah,
I think your options during the day, particularly if you're in the Metro Boston area, are actually are pretty good, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are some. I don't know if we're gonna say the names or not, but like there are some salad places that you can go to. Yep. Even a fast food chain, which will remain nameless, they have a salad that I love. It is all but 400 calories. It's a simple chicken salad. They give me the dressing. I read the back of the dressing. I say, oh, geez, 100. Like, I think it's like 60 grams of sugar.
Yep.
So, okay, well, maybe I don't need all of this dressing. Maybe I'll have just a few, just enough to kind of get it to a place where it's something that, you know, I'm going to enjoy eating, and I eat that. Right? But I think a lot of people don't realize just how sneaky that sugar is, or how sneaky some of these ingredients
sugar,
can
if you could eliminate one thing in your diet and you could reduce the sugar, that is the one thing that I think people, it kind of sneaks by. Well, I'm gluten-free. Fantastic. You got 28 grams of sugar in that thing.
Yeah,
that's
an interesting thing. So because I do jiu-jitsu, we have a lot of Brazilian friends. A lot of that culture sort of is pervasive. And there's something called pão de queijo. It's a Brazilian cheese bread. That's the tapioca that I bought. The tapioca flour that I bought at the store. That's what that was for, right? And that's a good gluten-free option. Tapioca flour, the rice flours, right? All available at the Natural Food Exchange. I use that to make that bread, and it is delicious. But guess what?
Yeah, that's the ones you dropped off at the house.
Yeah, but guess what? If you actually look at the glycemic index, tapioca flour is up there with all of the other grains, right? So although, you know, I'm not sensitive to gluten, so it doesn't really make much of a difference.
But it really depends on your individual needs. Going back to the 75-year-old probably shouldn't be doing a 16-8 fast. If you are a type 2 diabetic, there are different choices than you would make, or I would make, or what have you.
So, I mean, by all means, you know, if you're thinking about making a change to your diet, talk to a dietitian, talk to your primary care, you know, the experts. But from my perspective, the reason why I got into nutrition and cooking was jiu-jitsu, right? I needed to lose weight for competition. Eventually that turned into sort of a fascination with food and with cooking. And as of late, I feel like I've almost been as fascinated with that as I have been with strength training and jiu-jitsu, just because I've made a sort of a promise to myself that I wouldn't eat out anymore. So if I have a hankering for something that I, you know, would otherwise eat out, I'm like, hey, you know what? I think I can probably try to make that myself.
Sadly, the kids won't allow that to happen.
That's a battle I don't have to fight, luckily, just yet. But what that turned into now is a very well-stocked pantry. Which, from an economic perspective, is very helpful in the long term, because now
absolutely.
I'm in a position where I can take a look on my phone. It's like, hey, I've got to hit the grocery store today. So I have no idea what we're going to eat this week. I'll go home, I'll see what I have. But first thing I'll do is I'll actually go on YouTube. And there are a handful of YouTube channels, cooking channels, that I really like online. And it's not so much for specific dishes, but rather techniques, right? So, hey, how do I, you know, something as simple as how do I cut?
you really do approach. Because approach cooking exactly the way you approach jiu-jitsu. I'm going to look at this guy to get not the specific arm bar, but I'm going to learn his overall philosophy. You're looking at cooking exactly the way you do jiu-jitsu.
Well, I mean, so as far as I know, like they're one and the same, right? If I don't eat, then
Yeah.
Like it contributes directly. But I'll give you an example of this week, right?
Yeah.
So I live near a large wholesale food store, so naturally I stop in there on the way home, and I end up going home with like 8 pounds of pork loin or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than just roast the pork loin in any in the way that you usually would do, which can be fantastic and is actually an economical way to get protein in your diet if you're not abstaining from pork. But I was like, hey, what can we do with this? How can we make this a little bit more interesting so that it's something that if I have to eat it every day, to help with my athletic and my weight loss goals, that it's something that I'm actually going to look forward to. Like you don't want it to be a chore. Like eating healthy food doesn't have to be, some things that you have to dread. Like, oh, gee, I don't have to eat these stems off the kale again. Like, no,
not at all.
I shouldn't have to do that. So really, where it came from was a desire to just eat better food, be more excited for the food that I was going to cook, and then also have it be healthy, right? So this week, I made a pork loin, and it was a stuffed pork loin.
I saw it.
Right? So a simple technique of you butterfly the pork loin, and then you sandwich it between saran wrap, and then you flatten it out.
Yep.
Right? And if I was going to make a chicken parm, it'd kind of be about the same thing, right? You flatten it out and bread it and all that stuff, right?
Yep.
So simply, you have that, and then it's like, okay, off to the races. Whatever ingredients that you have that go well together, whether it's, I think in that case, I think I did walnuts, Dijon mustard, and dried cranberries, all of which I had. I actually happened to have some walnuts frozen from last year from the pandemic. So, hey, I got to use these. So
work it up.
And taking that technique, I was able to say, hey, the next day I ended up making another one. I think I stuffed it with some spare mozzarella that I had. And then I made a quick tomato sauce with that, right? Something simple but healthy, right? It's not inherent. It's not bad for you. It's not like I'm
and that's also level 2 or 3. You can simply grill, you can grill on an open grill a pork tenderloin or a pork loin and have 3 days of food.
Yeah.
Done. Yeah. Half hour work, you fed yourself for $10 for 3 days.
I will say with all of this, momentum is everything. So getting started is usually the hardest part. Yeah. I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now the last week of November. I think I started fasting. I started sort of strictly dieting at the beginning of December. Usually like Thanksgiving is the last hurrah, and then I'm ashamed of myself, and then then begins the process of, hey, we're gonna get our stuff together. That getting started in December was tough because I was going from a diet of Chick-fil-A and Five Guys, and and even if I was cooking at home, it was still like, hey, I've got pounds of pasta that I bought for the pandemic. Even if it's chickpea pasta, guess what? It's still
it's still pasta.
Exactly. So going from that to trying to go to eat salads every day was kind of tough. Actually, what I did was I leveraged eating out. Right. So rather than go eat out at Five Guys, I'd go to someplace and buy a salad.
Right.
And
so you ease into it a little bit.
Now, eating a salad out, again, hidden calories. Most of those calories are hiding in the salad dressing. So you've got to be cognizant of that.
Yep.
Right? You've got to realize that even if there's a healthy option when you're eating out, chances are there might be something that you can omit. If I need a healthy snack, sometimes, and I can't avoid it, maybe I'll go to, I think sometimes I would go to McDonald's, or I'd go to like a fast food restaurant, and I would buy the burger, and I would just either eat the patty open-faced, and then toss the bread, because most of the calories
it's
actually
I mean,
coming
it's
from
not great. It's not great meat, and high in sodium.
Exactly,
but you're
But if I need something
mitigating the damage.
If I'm in the middle, if I'm in a place like, there's a lot of times where I'd go to, rural New Hampshire or rural Vermont, and you get off the highway and it's like there's nothing.
We should do a whole thing next time on mitigating the damage when you travel.
Yeah.
That's a big, our buddy who travels for a living.
Yeah.
That's his biggest issue.
Yeah.
Flies here, flies there.
Yeah. And then in that stress of travel, it's like you want something that's comforting. You want something that's,
Yeah, and there's also boredom sitting on the plane, and there's a whole host of you don't sleep as well. Your schedule's thrown off. Yeah.
So to boil it down, I would say that if you're looking to make a change, you're looking to make a change in your diet, in terms of just sort of the quality of the food that you eat.
Yeah.
I for me, what has worked is a diet that's based around meat and vegetables. And what that's done is forced me to look at, hey, maybe I can introduce more variety in terms of vegetables into my diet. Maybe I can eat more than just broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots. Right? Maybe I'll get some asparagus. Maybe I can try these different kinds of foods. And it was very interesting the first go around at the grocery store where every time I'd go and look for something that I'd never bought before, get it home, and then find out how to make it. And through that process of repeating that over and over, I learned how to, make all kinds of things. Like, hey, what do I do with this arugula? Like,
and the other thing is that you've surrounded yourself in a culture that is, jiu-jitsu in general is about health, and the black belt professor is expected to be able to roll the entire time with you.
Yeah, you definitely want to set an example for the students that are coming in. Right.
Yeah, so there's a culture that you surround yourself by where if you surround yourself with different people who are like, oh, look at you ordered a salad, that's great. Drop the vinaigrette on it. That's considered healthy. What you just described, if I ordered a salad and put half a bottle of blue cheese dressing on it, you would give me nothing but crap for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I would. And it's not, it's not from a sort of like a negative shaming perspective, right? It's
no.
I'm trying to do that. It's just,
But you would you would send me a text at 11 o'clock at night reminding me of my bad choice.
Yeah. It's like, hey man, maybe that fits into, maybe you earned that salad dressing. Maybe you went out and did, one of those
maybe that's
triathlons that you do.
Maybe that's why you didn't roll as well last Sunday.
Right.
Okay.
But really, at the end of the day, generally speaking, it's sort of all about it coming from a place of love, like a positive place. Where,
no.
We all want the
You're
best
not
for
shaming.
each other.
I didn't mean to infer. You're
No.
You're shaming me. I meant to.
Because that plays a role as well, right? A lot of people.
It's all good-hearted.
There's a lot of. I feel like for a lot of people that's like if you ask them, hey, what's one thing that you would want to change in your life? Is that they would want to look and feel healthier.
I would want to speak Portuguese.
Well, that is not a problem we're going to solve at the Natural Food Exchange. However,
that's
at your local jiu-jitsu school.
It's been 15 years. I still haven't learned anything.
Chances are you can learn Portuguese. You will ruin the wrong things first, but that's okay.
No. All right. I think we've done about a half hour or so.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you
to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
Always welcome.
Thank you for the rolls. Kenny, thank you for letting us do this here. Much appreciated.
Now, the only thing I didn't mention is that I bake, and that is not healthy food.
The baking we will do next time.
Yeah, the baking
as treats.
I bake bread and give it away. I try to do my best not to, but the smell of fresh baked bread on the empty.
Oh yeah, the banana bread. The banana bread.
Have I given you a banana?
I thought you gave me one long time ago, like a year ago or so.
Yeah, some of my students used to bring
you told me about you had the rule.
So the baking is an interesting one because it was something I just got bored with. I was literally sitting at home bored Memorial Day 2019. So hey, why don't I make some bread?
Oh, the first time you sent me the video and you're like taking the straight edge razor that you have set up and you're like delicately slicing so you get that nice little X. I'm like, what the hell is going on with
the baking? Is actually kind of funny because it actually came out of so I hadn't been able to go back to. So I'm originally from the Virgin Islands, right? So I hadn't been able to go back home in quite a while. And a lot of the reason, like a lot of the cultural aspects of the Virgin Islands was actually caught up in food, right? So,
absolutely.
So when I go home and, when my friends go home, the first thing that we're trying to do when we get off the plane is, we're going to go here to go get this. And we're
get
going to
the
go
food,
try to get the pate and go get this bread and go get that bread.
Yeah.
So it was really out of a homesickness to sort of recreate a lot of the things that I enjoy eating.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
And then when I was able to do that successfully, because a lot of the things that we have, while the healthy options are, typically those are something I spend a lot of time in looking into. The baking is something more of a that's just something I want to get good at, just like I want to get good at jiu-jitsu or I want to get good at whatever it is I do.
Because you give a lot of it away. You don't concern. You're eating all the meat that I see you produce. You give a lot of your baked goods away.
Most of that food away.
So you make all of us unhealthy.
I do bring it
and then
to the
you
gym
keep all the healthy stuff for yourself. I see where this is going. This is,
I think of it as everyone's helping, saving me from myself.